Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's presentation is about assuring clarity of writing my journal article. As you all know, science is getting more complex and more harder to read, and we use today in most our scientific work abbreviation, acronyms, numbers, values, and concepts that makes anybody try to understand what we are writing very difficult. So it's very important to be strategical and to make sure that what you're writing is clear and to make sure that your article is clearly written so that others can read it and finally can benefit from it. The first advice I advise you to start with is to consult your journal author guideline. In these guidelines, they will tell you what should be done, what is the writing style expected, and what are the limits of words of your journal. We all know that some journals ask maximum limit for words. Sometimes it's 6,000 words, 10,000 words, 12,000 words. In other journals, it's about pages. So make sure that you read the journal author guideline to make sure that you will size your text and your article to fall within the requirement of your journal. Also, allow me to remind you and reiterate on a previous presentation I gave before about the foundation of scientific writing, where I was saying that the foundation of scientific writing are based on the community that brings value to your work, the story and the persuasion, the organization and structure, and number 4 about clarity and communication. And actually today's presentation is mainly about this fourth aspect, which is clarity and how to write in a clear way and how to communicate in the best way with the reader to make sure they have access to your manuscript. Now, when we look at any article or scientific article, there is two parts of it. There is a part that is scientific and there is a part that is communication. The communication side, what I call storytelling, because here storytelling and argumentation are the basis of this communication to convince others about the importance and the relevance of your work. While the scientific part is the part that is reporting the findings in a very dry and very rigorous and very concise way. Now, when you are writing a scientific paper, you need to combine the communication side, which is based on clarity and storytelling, with the scientific part which is very factual, objective, and concrete and tangible. So a good manuscript is a mix between science and communication. And if you allow me to explain to you what are the chapters that fall on the communication side and which are the chapters that fall on the science side, I would say that chapter 1, the introduction, and chapter 2 of your article, which is the literature review and the introduction, fall on the communication and storytelling side, together with chapter 5, the discussion. Here we are trying to argument, we are trying to have a narrative, to build a logic, to talk to the other and have a duetto through the writing. While when we are talking about the research method and the findings and the conclusion, I will consider them more on the side of science. They are very objective, they are very dry, rigorous, technical, procedural, descriptive, analytical, critical, less critical, but they are more analytical, interpretive, and this makes them more factual and tangible based description. So any good scientific paper is a mix between both. And allow me now to start our presentation with the terminologies that you have to take care of when you are starting to write your paper. Now, you belong to a community and you are going to publish your journal in a certain community or to a certain journal that has a certain community. Make sure that your community have their own terminologies and the words and the concept that they use and theories. So it's very important to set the words that communicate the terminologies used in your scientific community. You must know the words that particularly used in your community, and you can have some terminologies that are shared between different technologies. Try to make sure that you are not mixing or using a term used in a certain technology in a certain community and mix it in your own community. So one of the very important aspects when I'm writing my article is to make sure that I have concepts and terms that are commonly used in my community. So train yourself to look for words, terms that create values and that are frequently used in your community by reading previous papers and articles in the same journals where you are going to publish. Make sure to create an invaluable word lists that are commonly used in association with your research topic, and use those words when you start to write in your introduction section and in your discussion. Also, one of the very important aspects that are very important to take into account are the use of definitions and terminologies in a consistent way. If you are defining any concept or any term or any variable, you need to make sure that this definition is consistent throughout your manuscript and that this definition matches the definition of your community. So once you introduce a concept, make sure first that it is commonly used in your community. If it's not commonly used in your community, then you will need to introduce it. So you will need to explain what it is. Reformulate any complex definition in your work and make sure that people can understand it, and you can have complementary, more intuitive ways to explain this concept, and make sure to reinforce the reader's understanding by explaining well what is this concept about. If you are just using a term that is complex or difficult and it is not commonly used in your community and people don't understand it, most probably people will cut off and stop reading, and your paper will get less read and maybe even rejected. Make sure also that your use of terms and definition is consistent. Avoid too many synonymous that you can easily confuse your reader. And if you use too many of these synonyms for the same thing, this will be also confusing. So don't flux your muscles by describing the same concept or the same phenomena using different terms. Use for the paper one term for the same phenomena across the whole article. Keep it simple, explain it at the beginning, and even explain it later on once more again maybe in the discussion to make sure people can understand this definition and it is accessible. Also, if you are using numbers and names, make sure that you are capitalizing them. So capitalize the names such as theorem, algorithm, method, figure, table. Those are names, so they need to have a capital letter at the beginning. Make sure to have small numbers. If you are using small numbers, they should be spelled out unless used as names. So for example, don't say the method requires 2 approaches. It's better to say algorithm 2 is illustrated in figure 1. It requires 17 iterations and the count was increased by 2, and there are 2 reasons for this. If the number is most of the time less than 10, we directly we write it in the words, not as a number. So this is also very important to take this into account, and you can use this example to make sure that you are highlighting the names, putting them forward, and you are giving them a capital letter wording, and make sure that you avoid using small numbers in your text. Now when it comes to use acronyms, very important to take into account that acronyms and abbreviations are commonly used. They need to be convenient for compound terms occurring repeatedly, but don't over abuse it. So reader cannot remember more than few acronyms beside the standard ones. So avoid the acronym overdose. Believe me, I sometimes read one introduction or one abstract, and in the same abstract I can find 5 acronyms. Actually, it is not recommended to have any acronym in the abstract. And if you are using any acronym across the text, it is not recommended to use more than 3 to 5 acronyms across the text so that people will understand. Because it's not here about a memory test. It's about making your text understandable, and sometimes people will read only the introduction and then they will jump reading the discussion or the conclusion. So make sure that the acronym is always explained at every section. Avoid using abbreviation or define them in the title. No acronyms in the title, no acronyms in the highlights, no acronyms in the abstract, no acronyms in the conclusion. So make sure that the acronyms can be counterproductive. If you are using too many of them and every group of words you are using an acronym, you'll end up having a very complicated text, and almost you need a robot to read it, not a human being. So it's very important to be very to be very thrifty with the use of acronyms. 1, 2, 3 maximum. Use them, the most important acronyms, and that's it across your text. Now let's move to another important concept related to clarity in writing your scientific article, sections and paragraphs. What should I do in section and paragraphs? Well, as we all know, we are using the IMRAD method, which is introduction, methodology, results, and discussion, to structure our paper. So make sure that you have sections and that you are breaking every section. Let's say the introduction section, you have a subsection for it. So breaking down a section into different paragraphs is what allows it to flow in a logical manner. So make sure that you have a paragraph about one idea, another idea, a third idea. By that, you can, any section you have in your writing, you can have an introduction at the beginning. Let's say I am in the introduction. Make an introduction in the introduction paragraph. Then you can have a body paragraphs, and then finally a conclusion paragraph. The same applies to the literature review, it applies to the discussion section, it applies even to the results section. So that make sure always when you are starting a section like the introduction or the literature review or the results or the methodology or the discussion, that you always have a paragraph introducing your work, some body paragraphs related to the content, and finally a conclusion paragraph. This is an example. I have here an introduction, I have a conclusion, I write paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, and in every paragraph I have some ideas that I'm going to discuss. This is how we design a section before writing it. Because technically speaking, you should first start with a skeleton, write your structure of your paper, the IMRED, and then go into every section, the introduction and in the literature review and in the methodology, the result and the discussion, and recreate a substructure. And in this substructure start with an intro, body, paragraphs, and finally conclusion paragraph. And write some bullets in each of these paragraphs before you write a full cohesive paragraph. Now, previously I discussed the mind map concept. You can have a look on previous videos, but for your information, I always advise you to have a storytelling technique. Make sure that you create the paragraphs into a form that allows you to have a flowing chain of ideas and argumentation, and make sure that in every paragraph there is 1 or 2 bullets that are articulating the main idea or the message that you want to convey, so that when you start to write, you have already a skeleton and a substructure, and you have even some component or elements that you will use to use the text and the wording as a red thread to connect them all together. And mind mapping is very useful, because what we do actually when we write a paper, we create a big map and we start to discuss what will be the sections, the subsections, and in every subsection how many paragraphs, and what will be the key ideas and messages that will be conveyed in every paragraph based on some bullets. And by that, when we design this whole mind map of the paper, we start only then to write. So it's important to keep this into account. Also take care about indentation. Indentation is a very important, it's the recess in the sentence. When we are writing, we always take into account indentation. It is used to make the text more visible and to break the complexity and the structure of your chapters. So it is used to separate paragraphs. As you can see, I have here indentation at the beginning, and then another one, another one. This makes the paragraphs not all connected. So when I'm trying to read a text, I make sure that, okay, I am in paragraph 1 or in 2. If I want to have a break, I can stop and I can come resume my reading. But without indentation, the whole text seems as if it's all one block of text, as if the whole section is one paragraph. While indentation is very helpful to show and facilitate the access to your document and separate the different paragraphs, so that you know, this is paragraph 1, what is the main message here, the paragraph 2, and then people can better, easily read your work. For sure, writing paragraph is an art, because it requires your ability to make always at the beginning an introduction, then go into the beef, go into the messages, the bullets, key facts or information you want to convey, and then you have to conclude at the end of each paragraph. So the average length for any scientific paragraph is between 150 and 250 words. It's not good at all to make a long paragraph. Exceeding 300 words for a paragraph means that you are losing it. And in this sense, you have to make sure that when you are designing your section, you have to make sure that certain amount of ideas, 1 or 2 maximum per paragraph, and the paragraph will be short, up to 250 words. And if you have other thoughts, you want to say something else, you need to move to a new paragraph. And also, don't forget at the end, you're always counting the words like I told you at the beginning. So it's very important to design your paragraphs, and once you are done with your structurization and your mind map for your paper, you can start now to write each paragraph based on the bullets available, always having a general statement at the beginning, going into the substance or the arguments you want to convey, and you close the chapter again, the paragraph again with a conclusive sentence. What is very important when I'm writing paragraph is to use different transitions to do transition from a paragraph to another. Otherwise it will be very boring. So make sure that you use a narrative. The narrative needs a sequence. And in this sense, the best transition that I can use, if I have words or paragraphs that are in agreement, I can start with and, also, equally, identically, uniquely, like, moreover, as well, furthermore, likewise, similarly. I am still in the same agreement. So the paragraph is building on the previous paragraph, and the same ideas are in the same line of agreement. Once I go into contradiction, I do a turning over. If I say, however, but, I'm going now into contradiction, I can use a different transition word like but, despite, however, yet, conversely, rather, whereas, although, otherwise, instead, albeit. Those can all be used as contradiction. And then finally, I can come to the last logic of writing a sentence, which is the ABT, the consequences. Then comes finally the therefore. And the therefore can be replaced by so, thus, consequently, hence, thereupon, accordingly, as a result, henceforth, for this reason, in that case. And make sure if you are using the ABT, the agreement, contradiction, and consequence, you are using them only one time in every section. So if you're writing an introduction, you can have a lot of paragraph agreement, and then you do one time contradiction. You can have several paragraphs with the contradiction, and then you do one last time therefore or consequence, and then you can have several paragraphs under the consequences. Because most of the time it is this ABT logic, agreement, contradiction, consequence, to make sure that you are using this technique. There are some others, but if you are, most of the time we are using these techniques in connecting and doing transitions between paragraphs within one section. Now, allow me to move to another important aspect of clarity of scientific writing for an article, which is the clarity itself. The clarity is related to the use of verbs, for example. Make sure that you are using present tense for the established knowledge. If you are in the literature review and you are reporting on established knowledge, for example, platinum is a transition metal commonly used as a catalyst. In this paper, we show that. So you are here in the introduction or you are in the literature review, you are using the verb tense, present tense. Once you are moving on the literature review and you are talking about work that was done before, or you are in the method or in the result, you have to use the past tense. Here we are in the reference to the work that was done. So, for example, we say Janssen and L observed. We measured the diameter of the nanoparticles using this device. The activity was dependent on. So, it's very important to use the proper tense. And to remind you again, the present tense is mainly used either in the introduction or in the literature review if I am describing established work. However, if I am doing a classical literature review and citing authors and what they did in the literature review, I use a past tense. If I'm in the method, it's in the past tense. And the result section need to be in the past tense. Because here we are reporting the method and the result of our research that we did previously. So this is the best way to use the tenses. Also, it's very important and it's very encouraged to use active tenses versus passive tenses when you are writing an article. An active verb will be like, we collected samples from 6 sites in Brussels. For example, the committee reviewed the research proposal. Here you are emphasizing the researcher's direct and clear, concise way of communication. But if you are in the passive way, you will say samples were collected from 6 sites in Brussels instead of we collected the samples. The research proposal were reviewed by the committee, or instead of the committee reviewed the research proposal. Here you are emphasizing the research indirectly, you are more wordy, you are more dragging, and it's more applicable in the message section, but I strongly recommend to use the active tense in most of your formulation so that you make sure that your text is appealing, understandable, and less wordy. For sure, when we are in the active sense, we never use I, and we try to avoid we as much as possible, but I is for sure a forbidden. We use it if it will end up having an active tense formulation, then you can use it, but still you have to avoid it and make sure that there's a minimum use of we. For sure, also, when you are in the passive nouns, try to make sure in a certain moment that you break it with an active sense, even if you prefer to write in a passive sense. Now let's talk about the writing style that you should adapt when you're writing your text. Make sure that you don't have long sentences. So the sentence length is very important. Keep sentences short. Cut long sentences. You should not have a sentence that is up to 2-3 lines. Make sure to avoid redundancy. The average length for a scientific writing is 12 to 15 words, which is 1 line or 1 line and a part, 1/4, for example. So make sure you have always short sentences and use the period to stop. Text is like music. Sentences have a rhythm. If you have a long sentences, then your rhythm will be very monotonous, very long, and nobody will read it. So read and reread your work and prove and change the wording if it does not flow in a smooth way. And the best way is to read loudly to make sure that the sentences are short, and you need to be very strict with making short sentences. This is the most common mistake of early career researchers. When they start to write, they easily write 3-4 sentences without any periods. Also make sure that your writing style is simple, because simple is better. Use simple words, don't overcomplexify. Many early career researchers, they think by using more complex words, they are showing that they are more knowledgeable, and they are showing that they are intelligent and smart, while in fact you are reducing the ability to understand your text. So keep simple words, avoid complex words. Like I told you, even the acronyms need to be reduced. Keep your writing very simple, avoid any jargon, use only scientific terminologies. For example, you can replace some complex terms. Instead of saying a peripheral edema, you can say an ankle swelling. Instead of saying echocardiogram, you can say a heart ultrasound. Instead of saying tachycardia, you can say fast heart rate. So always opt for simple terms to make your work and make your article accessible and readable by others. Today we are in the open access world, so it's very common that normal people will read a scientific article, try to find information, so make sure that you are writing in a simple wording. Always when it comes also to the use of superlatives, do not use any superlatives of praise. Don't say for your own work this use of supra. Avoid also we achieved, our excellent work, we're presenting outstanding work, our outstanding result, our excellent methodology. Don't praise your work in the scientific. Just be objective, describe it, and that's it. Also, you need to avoid these superlatives because they will lead to generalization. You end up saying the paper presents a perfect solution to the problem. This theory is extremely important. Our remarkable work of breakthrough in the field, all that should be avoided. Never use this type of wording and articulations. Researchers always argue that this is a generalization if you say that. Most of the researchers, this is a generalization, unbiased, unbacked. The biggest black hole merger. So all these superlatives of biggest, the most common, the most remarkable, the extremist, the largest, and these kind of words, try to avoid them. You are a scientist, you are rigorous, you are modest, you need to be humble, you have to show humility. So avoid these big word and using this mouse big wordy expressions in your text. Now I'm done with the writing clarity. I'm going now to move to the proof of reading, which is one of the aspects that are very important. It can distinguish somebody from another. Now the text is written, you have a draft, and you're almost close to submit your work. One of the most important steps that need to be considered, and you need to dedicate time for it, is proofreading your text. You need to take a distance of your text and start to proofread it. Well, one of the most common advantages of proofreading is that you can detect run-on sentences. What are run-on sentences? It's the big monster when you write. It's simply having "let's eat kids." What is "let's eat kids"? You simply forgot the comma. Instead of saying "let's eat kids," you are just saying "let's eat kids." Believe me, more than 85% of researchers, when they write, they do these mistakes and use run-on sentences. They are sentences that are not having commas, that are not having semicolons, they are long, there is no period. So make sure to use the comma and to save lives. Very important. And the proofreading process is the process. I can accept, I can tolerate that during reading, maybe you made some mistakes, you forgot about them, you were taken by the articulation and inspired by writing, and you wanted to assure a flow while you're writing. But if you show me a text that has a lot of run-ons, meaning that you didn't do a proofreading, and this is a big mistake. So make sure that these sentences are not there. A run-on sentence combines many ideas, so the run-on sentence occurs when two or more sentences are incorrectly written as a one, and this is due to the creativity of the writer and to the motivation and the enthusiasm to have a flow and compact the ideas together. This is wrong. Run-on sentence example: the outfielder ran back, the ball sailed over his head. Two things. This is wrong. The outfielder ran back, period. The ball sailed over his head. So I have to break it in two. And this is one of the major roles of proofreading, that you start to look at your text and detect any run-on sentence to make sure that you avoid it. So divide the sentences, add a semicolon between independent clauses, use them also in moderation, and make sure to add a comma and a coordinating conjunction like for, and, nor, but, yet, so. Those are very important, and this is the number one mistake done when doing a proofreading. So if you are proofreading with the purpose to detect those run-ons and to correct them, then you are doing a very good job. Next thing that you need to take care of is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing happens a lot for early career researchers who are not used to write, together with plagiarism. Well, what do the researchers do? Most students produce unacceptable paraphrases involving leaving out important information, forgetting to document the original substituting inappropriate synonyms, or plagiarism. So paraphrasing is something that you should take care of, and you should avoid it. If you are an early career researcher starting to write your first articles, I know it's very difficult because you are unable to formulate, to articulate, to express, and it's easier for you is just to look at the text or a previous document and paraphrase it, and you think this is intelligent. I can tell you that today with a plagiarism software like Authenticate or Grammarly, they are very powerful because they are using artificial intelligence. The paraphrasing will be detected. So what you have to do is to be aware about it. If you are paraphrasing, if you did it in the past, try to avoid it. Try to be conscious about it, to know what it is. And if you are going to use a previous text, make more effort to formulate it in your way. And definitely, there is no discussion here. Make sure to cite the sources and make sure to report the most important findings. So read, take notes, practice the writing, and increase your vocabulary. If somebody tells me, I am a young researcher and I'm having a problem of paraphrasing and I copy a lot of text when I'm writing, what should I do? I tell them, number one, you are not taking notes. If you are somebody who has always a notebook on him, and while you are watching a YouTube video, or you are attending a conference, or attending a lecture, or attending a meeting, you write your own notes, this is the only way to develop your writing skills. Because taking notes is forcing your brain and your hands to write, to take an idea or a thought and articulate it, to express it, to make a draft out of it. So the best way to fight this paraphrasing phenomena and copy the copycat phenomena of copying a part of a text and reformulating and really being authentic and genuine and writing from your own brain and your own heart is to take notes. Always take notes. Read. Practice the writing. So use the vocabulary. Build up a list of vocabulary in your field, so that when you start you write yourself, you will have already a kind of pool of text that you can refer to. Also, one of the most common mistakes that need to be checked during a proofreading is to avoid being verbose. Verbose, in other words, means that you are having a padded text. It's too stuffed. It's too wordy. So verbosity means wordiness, a lot of blah, 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 blah. So using an excessive amount of words is a bad thing. Verbosity can make our writing confusing and ineffective. I can tell you personally, my first article I wrote something around 18,000 words, and it needed to be only 12,000. So obviously I was afraid, and I was writing too much, and I was too verbose, and I missed out the whole message. So my supervisor kept telling me, cut it down, cut it down, cut it down, and I cut it down my text from 18,000 words to 12,000 words. At that time I was not aware about the importance of starting writing with a limit of words from the beginning, so that you don't start to become verbose, adding words and so on. So avoid all the terms like these expressions, all things being equal, all things considered, as a matter of fact, nowadays, as far as I am concerned, at the end of the day, at the present time, due to the fact, for all intents and purposes, for the most part, for the purpose of, in a manner of speaking, in my opinion, in the event of, it has long been known. I mean, those are horrible words. Avoid them. And the most killing one nowadays, I find it in many texts. So avoid these useless words. Take them out, be concise. Like I told you, short sentences, short ideas, compact paragraphs, be to the point. The shorter, the better. And for sure, while you are doing your proofreading, make sure to avoid having any inappropriate writing styles, like using a bit, a lot, almost, every, nearly, quiet, very. Those are all terms should never be found in any scientific article, because they don't say anything. They are approximations, they are vague, they are not clear, they are jargon, they are slang sometimes, so avoid them. Also, don't do any overdose of etc and eg, etc. or for example. Some people just hate them, so avoid using etc. and for example. Also avoid any overdose of very, clearly, really, totally. These also terms are not useful, and make sure that you are, during your proofreading, cleaning the text from these words and that they are not in your text. For sure, before ending up your proofreading, I will come to the last part of today's presentation. Make sure while you are proofreading your text to revise and edit. Revise and edit your text. Ask yourself, does the story make sense? Did I include the most important content in relation to the word limit? Did I divide every section appropriately or not? And make sure that while you are proofreading, before you submit your paper, you need to have a review workshop, especially if you are in the first 10 journal articles. The first 10 journal articles, period, where you are writing your first 10, you need to have a review article. Ask any one of your colleagues or your supervisor or any person who is good in language to help you going through the document together. You can also hire a writing assistant or use a software like Grammarly, or you can even for free copy the text in Google Docs. Use the Google Docs Word, copy the text, and Google Docs has a very powerful English correction algorithm. So this can be also one of the aspects. So either you go for a writing assistant and ask for an editor for money, either you use a software like Grammarly, it is for 1 month for free, but later you have to pay. Google Docs is for free, and you can also use the Belcher diagnostic word macro, very famous macro that can do autocorrection when you are writing. All these are very important ways of correcting the text, and I really advise you to do it with somebody so that you introduce rigor and you make sure that the story is understandable and it can be shared with others. Well, that's it with today's presentation. Some takeaway messages. Hold on before I leave you. Why clarity in scientific writing is very important. It's very important to make sure that your text will be well cited, well read, and actually accepted. Now, read, take notes, practice writing, increase your vocabulary. This is the #1 advice to make sure that you are a good writer. Design your paper structure and subsection and use the mind mapping technique to make sure that there is a full detailed map of your manuscript before even you start to write, so that when you start to write, it's a very easy thing to do. Start writing by creating short and correct sentences in a bullet format to fill up your substructure and to formulate the basis and the essence of your paragraphs. And for sure, use the correct tenses and the correct grammar for your writing, depending on the section. Check your narrative and the story through the proofreading. Invest in the proofreading, and for sure you need to plan the proofreading. Have an English speaker check your manuscript or seek internal peer reviewers or use additional software so that you make sure that the text is clear enough and it is well written, it is well structured, there is a story, there is a message I'm conveying, I have something to say, I have a finding, and by that you can make a difference. Well, we talked also about the terminologies, the importance of having a lot of terminologies that are relevant to your field. We talked also about the sections, we talked about the sentences, we talked about the proofreading. This is the whole summary of today's presentation. Also, I'm not saying to avoid seeking training. If you find any opportunity to seek training, do it. Those trainings are all offered for free on Coursera. There is a training offered by Lund University, Writing English at University. There is another one, the best one that I'm recommending, Writing in Sciences, Stanford University. It's for free. You have also English Composition one in Duke University. Also, it's a very good one. And you have a UCI Academic English Writing. This is a very basic. If your English is very poor or very basic, you are in a B level, then I advise you to start with the UCI training and then go to the Stanford. The Stanford is more advanced and it will bring you to a very good level of English proficiency in writing mainly and clarity in your writing. By that, I end up today's presentation. I hope it was useful. I hope you write your manuscript in a clear way and you benefit from today's presentation. Thank you very much. Today's presentation was about assuring clarity in writing your journal article. Best of luck.